Hello and welcome. Today, we are going to try to wrap our heads around some of the biggest, oldest, most mind-bending questions ever asked. We're diving headfirst into the world of paradoxes. These are the logical puzzles that have stumped geniuses for centuries and forced all of us to rethink everything we thought we knew.
You've definitely heard this one before, right? It's the classic playground riddle. But behind that question is a feeling that gets right to the heart of what we're talking about today. It feels impossible, like your brain is trying to compute something that just, breaks.
And you know what? That feeling of your brain breaking is exactly the point. These aren't just clever word games. Philosophers and scientists use paradoxes to test the absolute limits of our logic. They're like intellectual crowbars that we can use to pry open our most fundamental beliefs about the universe itself. So, here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to nail down what a paradox actually is. Then, we'll explore 3 legendary paradoxes that touch on who you are, the nature of infinity, and logic itself. And finally, we'll see why wrestling with these puzzles is so important for moving forward. Ready? Let's jump in. Okay, first things first. What are we really talking about when we use the word paradox?
So, a true paradox isn't just a simple contradiction. It's a chain of logic that seems totally sound, but it leads to a conclusion that completely smashes against something we take for granted. One of those common sense beliefs. A real paradox forces you to stop and think, wait a minute, maybe one of the basic things I believe is just wrong.
To see this in action, let's look at the famous barber paradox. The setup is pretty simple. There's a village, and in that village, there's a barber. His rule is, he shaves all the men who do not shave themselves, and only those men. Seems straightforward enough, right?
But then, you hit the killer question. Who shaves the barber? Think about it. Does he shave himself? It feels like there has to be a simple yes or no answer. So let's follow the logic and see where it takes us.
And this is where we get trapped. Okay, so if the barber shaves himself, he breaks his own rule because he's only supposed to shave guys who don't shave themselves. But if he doesn't shave himself, then he perfectly fits the description of someone the barber is supposed to shave. So he must shave himself. He's caught in this perfect, inescapable, logical loop.
So what's the solution? Well, it's actually pretty simple. The initial premise is just impossible. A barber with this exact job description just cannot exist in our reality. This is what philosophers call a pseudo-paradox. It doesn't really challenge a deep belief about the universe, but it's a fantastic warm-up for the paradoxes that do.
All right, let's level up and get a bit more personal. We're going to tackle the idea of identity with a puzzle that's been debated for literally thousands of years, the ship of Theseus. Okay, so the story goes something like this. The famous ship of the hero Theseus is kept in a harbor as a monument. But it's made of wood, and over the years, the planks start to rot. So every time a plank decays, it's carefully removed and replaced with a brand new, identical one. This goes on for years and years, until, eventually, not a single original piece of wood is left. And that brings us to the question that has stumped people for ages. Is this ship floating in the harbor, now made of entirely new materials, is it still the same ship? Your gut might scream yes, or no, or maybe just, I don't know. And that, my friends, is the paradox. But wait, it gets even better. The philosopher Thomas Hobbes added a brilliant twist. He said, what if some collector gathered up all the old, original planks that were discarded and then reassembled them? Now you have 2 ships. So which one is the real ship of Theseus? Is it the one in the harbor, or is it the one built from all the original pieces?
And this is exactly why this ancient puzzle is so powerful. It's not really about wood and nails. It's got you. See, your body is constantly replacing its own cells. The physical you that exists right now is made of almost entirely different stuff than the you from 10 years ago. So, are you the same person? This paradox forces us to ask what identity even is. Is it our physical matter, our memories, our consciousness? What makes you, you?
From the nature of the self, we're going to take a huge leap now into the nature of reality itself with the paradoxes of infinity. These were dreamed up by the ancient Greek philosopher Zeno.
Okay, so his most famous argument is called Achilles and the tortoise. Imagine Achilles, the fastest hero in all of Greece, in a race against a slow tortoise. The tortoise gets a head start. Now, for Achilles to catch up, he first has to reach the point where the tortoise started. Makes sense.
But in the time it takes him to get there, the tortoise has crawled ahead a little bit. So now Achilles has to reach that new spot. But by the time he gets there, the tortoise has moved again. This creates an endless, infinite series of smaller and smaller gaps he has to close.
Zeno's mind-blowing conclusion was that because Achilles has to complete an infinite number of tasks, he can never, logically, catch the tortoise. Now, his point wasn't really about running. It was a radical argument designed to prove his teacher's theory that all change, all motion, everything we see is just an illusion.
Now, for over 2,000 years, this paradox was a huge roadblock for thinkers. The solution, believe it or not, finally came with the invention of calculus. What calculus showed us is that you can add up an infinite series of numbers and still get a finite, normal answer. So, the time it takes Achilles to cross all those infinite tiny gaps actually adds up to a very specific, limited amount of time. Our intuition about infinity was just plain wrong.
All right, for our last deep dive, we're looking at a paradox that pushes the very ideas of power and logic to their absolute breaking point. This is the omnipotence paradox.
This is the classic paradox of the stone. It's a question that theologians and philosophers have been tearing their hair out over for centuries. It seems to trap the whole concept of being all-powerful in a logical corner.
So, how do you get out of this one? Well, thinkers have come up with a few really clever answers. The first one is to just refine what all-powerful means. Maybe it means being able to do anything that is logically possible, but not the logically impossible, like creating a square circle. That's not a limit on power, it's just a meaningless string of words. Another view is that logic isn't some external law, but it's actually part of the very nature of an omnipotent being. And finally, some people, like C.S. Lewis, just said the question itself is nonsense. As he put it, nonsense doesn't suddenly start making sense just because you add the words "God can" to it.
So we've talked about barbers and ships, runners and rocks. What is the big takeaway here? Why do these ancient puzzles still matter so much to us today?
Because here's the thing. Paradoxes aren't dead ends. They're actually engines of progress. The struggle to solve Zeno's paradoxes directly helped lead to the creation of calculus. The ship of Theseus is still at the center of debates about personal identity, consciousness, and even artificial intelligence. And the omnipotence paradox forced us to get much, much smarter about logic and philosophy. You see, when a paradox shows us exactly where our thinking breaks down, it also points us exactly where we need to build something new.
And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. All the paradoxes we talked about challenge things people once considered obvious truths. That things move, that you are who you are, that power can be absolute. So the real question for us is, what obvious truth do we all believe today that's just waiting for the right question, the right paradox, to come along and show us that we still have so much more to learn? Thanks for watching.